Dog found chained in freezing cave. What the hunter does next leaves everyone in tears. The January wind howled through Atlanta's northern mountains, carrying ice crystals that stung like tiny needles. Sarah Collins pulled her police-issue jacket tighter, watching her breath form clouds in the bitter cold. Beside her, Max's muscular frame tensed, his black and tan coat bristling. 6 years of partnership had taught her to read every subtle shift in his demeanor, and right now, her Belgian Malinois partner was telling her something was very wrong. K9 unit responding to suspicious activity report near the old Sterling mine. Sarah spoke into her radio, her voice steady despite the gnawing concern in her gut. Max's ears were pricked forward, his usual playful demeanor replaced by intense focus. This wasn't their first call to the abandoned mining district. Drug dealers often used the vast network of caves for their operations, but something felt different today. Copy that, Collins. Backup's 20 minutes out. Weather's slowing everyone down. Sergeant Peter's voice crackled through the static. Probably another false alarm. These old mines spook the locals. Sarah acknowledged the message, but her eyes were on Max. The Belgian Malinois had started a systematic sweep of the area, his trained nose working the ground in precise patterns. They'd done this dance countless times before. From finding missing children to tracking down murderers, their reputation in the Atlanta PD was legendary. Max had an almost supernatural ability to sense danger, and right now, every line of his body screamed alert. The snow had started falling heavier, obscuring visibility beyond 20 feet. Sarah clicked on her tactical flashlight, its beam cutting through the swirling white. Max suddenly stopped, his head snapping toward a narrow crevice between two frost-covered boulders. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Not his usual alert sound, but something deeper, more primal. "What is it, boy?" Sarah whispered, unclipping her holster. Max's behavior had shifted from professional focus to personal concern, a change she'd only seen a handful of times in their partnership. The last time was when they'd found that child trafficking ring operating out of a suburban basement. They'd saved 11 kids that day. Max's paw prints left dark impressions in the fresh snow as he moved toward the crevice. Sarah followed, noting how the opening was wider than it appeared, barely visible behind years of overgrown vegetation. The beam of her flashlight revealed crude tool marks on the rock face. Someone had deliberately widened this entrance. The temperature dropped noticeably as they entered the passage. Sarah's flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting on the ground. Spent shell casings, recently fired. The acrid smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. Max's growl deepened, his body language shifting from alert to aggressive protection mode. "Atlanta PD, anyone here?" Sarah's voice echoed through the tunnel, bouncing off walls slick with ice. The answering silence was broken only by the whistle of wind through the rocks and the soft crunch of their footsteps on frozen ground. 20 feet in, the passage opened into a larger chamber. Sarah's light revealed modern mining equipment scattered about, too new to be from the mine's operational days. Max circled the space, his nose working overtime, before stopping at a heavy metal door set into the far wall. It looked recently installed, its surface free from the rust that covered everything else in the cave. Sarah reached for her radio. "Dispatch. We've got signs of recent activity. Requesting immediate—" The crack of gunfire cut through her words. Max spun toward the sound, but it was too late. Something heavy struck Sarah from behind, sending her flashlight spinning across the icy floor. As she fought to regain her footing, she heard Max's savage snarl, followed by a man's frightened curse. "Call off your dog!" a voice shouted from the darkness. "Call him off, or the next shot won't miss!" Sarah rolled behind a piece of equipment, drawing her weapon. In the dim light filtering through the cave entrance, she could make out at least 3 shadows moving. Max had positioned himself between her and the threats, his training warring with his protective instincts. "Max, hold!" Sarah commanded, her voice firm despite the fear gripping her chest. The Belgian Malinois froze, muscles coiled and ready. This was the moment of truth that defined their partnership, absolute trust under fire. A new sound echoed through the chamber, the metallic slide of a heavy bolt. The door was opening. Sarah's finger tightened on her trigger as flashlight beams cut through the darkness. But instead of more attackers, the light revealed something that made her blood run cold. Cages. Dozens of them stacked floor to ceiling, and in those cages, eyes reflected the light, terrified eyes of animals, dogs mostly, but also wolves and what looked like big cats. Some wore collars that marked them as pets. Others bore the wild look of creatures torn from their natural habitats. Beautiful collection, isn't it? A new voice, smooth and educated, emerged from behind the door. We've been watching you and your partner, Officer Collins. Such an impressive team. Max's abilities are quite remarkable. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs as the implications sank in. This wasn't a random patrol gone wrong. They'd been lured here. And Max was the target. Down! Sarah screamed as a net launched from the darkness. Max dove, but his back paw caught in the mesh. As Sarah fired at the shadows, something stung her neck. The world began to spin, her limbs growing heavy. The last thing she saw was Max fighting against multiple attackers, his loyalty to her overriding his chance to escape. Then darkness claimed her, leaving only the echoes of Max's desperate barks bouncing off the cave walls. Sarah's head throbbed as consciousness returned, each pulse bringing fragments of memory, gunfire, Max's snarls, the hidden door, those cages. She was lying in the snow outside the cave entrance, the bitter cold having kept her from freezing to death. Her radio crackled with worried voices. She must have been out for hours. Officer down. Collins, do you copy? Sarah, please respond. Peter's voice cut through the static. Her fingers, numb from cold, fumbled with the radio. Collins. Responding. Her throat felt like sandpaper. They took Max. They took my partner. Flashlight beams pierced the darkness as rescue teams converged on her position. The snow had stopped, leaving an eerie stillness broken only by the crunch of boots and urgent voices. Sarah pushed away the medic trying to check her vitals, forcing herself to stand despite the lingering effects of whatever drug they'd used. The cave, she managed, pointing toward the entrance. There's a hidden door. Animals in cages. But when the tactical team breached the chamber, they found only empty space. The door, the cages, even the spent shell casings. Everything had vanished. Only Max's tactical vest remained, torn and bloody on the frozen ground. They knew we were coming, Peters said, his weathered face grim. This was a setup from the start. Sarah knelt beside Max's vest, her fingers tracing the K9 unit patch they'd earned together. Inside one of the pouches, she found something that hadn't been there before. A burner phone, its screen displaying a single message. Want your dog back. Keep this quiet. Wait for instructions. Back at headquarters, the investigation room buzzed with controlled chaos. Sarah sat at her desk, still wrapped in an emergency blanket, refusing to go home despite medical advice. Her computer screen showed surveillance footage from every camera within 5 miles of the mine. Nothing. Collins. Now Captain Rivera's voice was gentler than usual. The lab results came back on the residue from your neck. It's a designer sedative, military grade. Whoever these people are, they're well-funded and professional. Sarah barely heard him. She was staring at Max's photo on her desk, taken the day they graduated from K9 training. His intelligent eyes seemed to look right through her, just like they had earlier that day when he sensed something wrong. She'd trusted his instincts then. She should have been more careful. The burner phone buzzed, making everyone in the room jump. A video message. Max, muzzled and chained in what looked like a concrete cell. Despite his situation, his posture remained proud, defiant. The camera panned to show a wall of monitors displaying various police stations across Atlanta. Beautiful animal, a voice said off-screen. The same educated tone from the cave. Did you know Belgian Malinois can distinguish between over 1,000 different scents? Max here is special, though. His detection rate is unprecedented. Imagine what someone could smuggle through this city's ports if they had a way to redirect such talent. Sarah's hands clenched into fists as the camera returned to Max. There was blood matted in his fur, but his eyes remained alert, scanning his surroundings. He was gathering intelligence, just as they'd trained. Even now, he was still working. "You have a choice, Officer Collins," the voice continued. "Work with us. Help us understand how he does it, and he lives. Refuse, and we'll see just how much punishment a police dog can take before breaking. You have 1 hour." The screen went dark. Sarah looked up to find every eye in the room on her. They all knew what was at stake, not just Max's life, but potentially their entire K9 program, if word got out that police dogs could be turned. "I need the room," she said quietly. After a moment's hesitation, Captain Rivera nodded, ushering everyone out. Alone, Sarah pulled up Max's service record on her computer. 6 years, hundreds of successful operations, millions in seized drugs and contraband. But it was the other numbers that mattered now. His weight, his training protocols, his vital statistics. If these people wanted to know what made Max special, she'd give them exactly what they asked for. She picked up the burner phone, dialed the only number in its memory. It rang once before connecting. "Ready to cooperate?" The educated voice sounded smug. "Check your email," Sarah replied. "I'm sending Max's complete training records, everything that makes him unique. But I need proof of life first. Let me talk to him." A pause, then rustling. She heard breathing, then a familiar whine. Max's way of saying he was okay. "Good boy," Sarah whispered, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Stay strong." The sound cut off. "Impressive files," the voice said. "But we both know a dog's true value lies in his bond with his handler. Meet me in 2 hours. Come alone or Max dies. I'll send coordinates." Sarah ended the call, wiped her eyes, and opened her desk drawer. Inside lay a small black case she hadn't touched in years, not since her undercover days. It contained everything she needed to become someone else. They wanted to know what made Max special. She'd show them. But first, she had to become the kind of person they'd want to recruit, someone willing to sell out everything she stood for, someone who could get close enough to find her partner. The burner phone buzzed again, coordinates in the industrial district near the port. Sarah checked her weapon, tucked the undercover kit into her jacket, and headed for the door. She didn't look back at the investigation room's evidence board, where Max's photo now hung under a single word: missing. She didn't need to look back. Every step forward was taking her closer to Max, and God help anyone who stood in her way. The shipping container yard loomed ahead, a maze of steel giants casting long shadows in the moonlight. Sarah adjusted her leather jacket, not her usual attire, but perfect for the role she needed to play. 6 years ago, before Max, she'd spent 18 months undercover infiltrating a drug cartel. Those skills were rusty, but they were all she had. As she walked toward the meeting point, her mind drifted to the day she first met Max. Not the official introduction at the K9 training facility, but the moment 2 weeks before, when she'd caught him breaking protocol during a training exercise. The scenario had been simple. Find the hidden drugs in one of 30 shipping containers. The other K9 units worked methodically, checking each container as their handlers directed. But Max had ignored his temporary handler's commands, darting straight to container 27. Inside, they found not only the practice drugs, but an unconscious stowaway suffering from dehydration. The training officers wanted to fail him. A police dog that didn't follow commands was dangerous. But Sarah saw something else in those intelligent eyes. Not disobedience, but initiative. Max hadn't ignored his training. He'd prioritized saving a life. "You're early." The voice from the phone cut through her memories. A man stepped out from behind a container, tall and distinguished-looking in an expensive suit. 2 armed guards flanked him, their weapons held casually but ready. "I appreciate punctuality. Where's my partner?" Sarah kept her voice cold, professional. "Safe, for now." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Dr. Marcus Kane. Your Max has caused quite a stir in certain circles. Do you know how many drug shipments he's intercepted in the past year alone?" 47, Sarah replied, worth approximately $68 million. 69.2, actually. Kane gestured for her to follow. But it's not the money that interests me. It's the pattern, or rather the lack of one. Other dogs need to search methodically. Max just knows, like that training exercise with the stowaway. Sarah's step faltered slightly. How did he know about that? They stopped at a pristine white shipping container. Unlike its rusted neighbors, this one hummed with the sound of climate control equipment. Kane pressed his hand to a hidden panel, and the door swung open to reveal a state-of-the-art mobile laboratory. 6 years ago, Kane continued, leading her inside, I headed a classified military program developing enhanced sensory capabilities in working dogs. We made progress, but nothing like what Max can do naturally. His ability to differentiate between urgent threats and routine contraband is unprecedented. Computer screens lined the walls, displaying Max's performance records, brain scans, and chemical analyses of his blood. Sarah recognized some of the data from his regular veterinary checks. The rest must have come from inside the department. You have a mole in the APD, she said, keeping her voice neutral. We have moles everywhere, Officer Collins. Kane pulled up a chair, gesturing for her to sit. Just like we had eyes on you and Max long before today. That drowning boy you pulled from the river last summer? We arranged that to test Max's ability to detect life signs at a distance. The bomb threat at the stadium? Another test. Rage boiled in Sarah's chest as the implications sank in. They'd been manipulating them, putting lives at risk to study Max like some lab specimen. She forced herself to remain still, channeling her anger into her undercover persona. What do you really want? Kane's smile widened. To understand what makes him special. Our latest research suggests it's not just Max. It's your partnership. Something about your specific emotional wavelengths in sync. We've been studying your cases, trying to isolate the pattern. A screen showed footage she'd never seen before, Max and her working various scenes, their movements perfectly coordinated. Another monitor displayed their vital signs during operations, their heartbeats synchronized during moments of high stress. Remember the Riverside killer case? Kane asked. You thought Max tracked the suspect by scent, but we had thermal cameras in the area. He played the footage. Watch. The killer's heat signature had faded hours before, but Max followed your unconscious micro-expressions. You picked up something at the scene, a pattern, an intuition, and he read you perfectly. Sarah remembered that night. They'd found the killer in an abandoned factory just minutes before he could claim another victim. She'd thought Max was leading her, but according to this footage, you were both leading each other, Kane said softly. A feedback loop of intuition and sensory input. We've never seen anything like it. And now, he pressed a button, and a live feed appeared. Max in his cell, pacing, alert. Now we can study it properly, break it down, replicate it. By torturing him? Sarah's mask slipped slightly. Only if necessary. We'd prefer cooperation. Help us understand the bond, how it developed. Work with us to refine it. Think of what we could accomplish together. Sarah stared at Max's image. Even through the grainy footage, she could read his body language. He was worried, but not about himself. His eyes kept moving to the camera, to the door, mapping the facility, gathering intelligence, still working, still trusting her to understand. Just like that first day, when everyone else saw disobedience and she saw something more. What's my alternative? She asked, although she already knew. Kane's expression hardened. We hired the best behavioral modification experts money can buy. One way or another, we'll get what we want. The only question is whether Max survives the process. Sarah nodded slowly, letting her shoulders slump in defeat. I want to see him first, before I agree to anything. Of course. Me? Kane stood, straightening his perfect suit. I believe in building trust. Let me show you what we've built here. All the secrets you and Max helped us uncover without even knowing it. As she followed him deeper into the facility, Sarah's hand brushed against the small transmitter hidden in her jacket. Back at APD headquarters, every word was being recorded, every screen photographed through her hidden camera. Kane wasn't the only one who'd been planning for years. The only question was whether she could keep up the act long enough to find Max. Because if Kane was telling the truth about one thing, it was this: their bond was special, and she'd walk through hell itself before letting anyone break it. The facility sprawled beneath the shipping yard like a hidden city. Sarah memorized each turn as Kane led her through sterile white corridors, past laboratories filled with cutting-edge equipment. Her hidden camera captured everything: security checkpoints, guard rotations, the subtle hum of backup generators. One way or another, she'd need an escape route. Impressive, isn't it? Kane gestured to a wall of monitors displaying various K9 units in action. We've studied police dogs worldwide, but none come close to Max's capabilities. Did you know he can detect chemical traces at 1 part per trillion? That's beyond what our best equipment can measure. Where is he? Sarah kept her voice steady, though every step without Max beside her felt wrong. Patience, Officer Collins. First, let me show you what we're trying to achieve. Kane pressed his palm to a biometric scanner, opening a heavy security door. Welcome to Project Echo. The room beyond made Sarah's blood run cold. A dozen dogs, Belgian Malinois like Max, German Shepherds, even a few breeds she didn't recognize, lay in glass-walled observation chambers. Each wore a complex web of sensors and monitoring equipment. Some paced restlessly, others lay unnaturally still. Early attempts at replicating Max's abilities, Kane explained, moving between the chambers. We've made progress, but the results are inconsistent. Some subjects developed enhanced sensory capabilities but became unstable. Others showed promise but couldn't form the necessary handler bonds. A massive screen dominated one wall, displaying neural mapping data. Sarah recognized Max's brain scans among them, his patterns distinctly different from the others. Beside her, Kane's voice took on an almost reverent tone. See these wavelength patterns? Normal police dogs show increased activity in the olfactory and auditory centers, but Max's entire brain lights up in synchronization with yours. It's as if your neural networks are somehow entangled. And the other dogs? Sarah nodded toward the chambers. What happened to their handlers? Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. Unfortunately, most handlers proved resistant to the program's goals. We had to pursue alternative methods. A high-pitched whine drew Sarah's attention to one of the chambers. A young Malinois pressed against the glass, its eyes wild with desperation. The dog's coat was patchy, sensors embedded directly into its skull. The sight made her stomach turn. Ah, Subject 23. Kane checked a nearby tablet. Promising results in scent detection, but extreme separation anxiety makes him unsuitable for field work. We're adjusting his medication now. Sarah's fingers clenched inside her jacket pockets. Every instinct screamed at her to act, to stop this madness. But Max was still somewhere in this labyrinth, and one wrong move would doom them both. This way. Kane gestured toward another security door. Max's results forced us to re-evaluate our entire approach. We thought we could engineer the perfect detection dog, but the key was there all along, the handler bond, your bond specifically. The next room looked like a combination of operating theater and physics lab. Complex machinery hung from ceiling tracks, and holographic displays showed rotating models of canine neural structures. In the center stood an examination table with restraints that made Sarah's heart skip. Our latest breakthrough. Kane touched a control panel, and the machinery hummed to life. We can now map and potentially transfer cognitive patterns between subjects. Imagine it. Dozens of dogs with Max's capabilities, each imprinted with a perfect copy of your partnership dynamics. You're talking about cloning our connection, Sarah said, fighting to keep the disgust from her voice. More like redistributing it. Kane's eyes gleamed with unsettling intensity. Max's abilities are extraordinary, but they're wasted on conventional police work. Our clients have more ambitious applications in mind. A door opened at the far end of the room. 2 armed guards entered, followed by a handler leading Max on a heavy chain. Sarah's heart clenched at the sight of her partner. His fur was matted with dried blood, his normally proud stance hampered by a limp. But his eyes locked onto hers with the same unwavering trust they'd shared for 6 years. Max! The name escaped her lips before she could stop it. Kane watched their reunion with clinical interest. Remarkable. Even after hours of separation, your neural patterns are already synchronizing. Observe. He pointed to a display showing their real-time brain activity. The wavelengths pulsed in perfect harmony. Max's ears twitched, a subtle signal they'd developed over years of operations. He'd found something, mapped something important. Sarah forced herself to look away to maintain her cover, but her mind raced, interpreting his body language. 3 quick ear movements, 3 minutes. A slight head tilt, east side. A barely perceptible paw shift, structural weakness. Your cooperation will make this much easier, Kane said, moving to the control panel. We'll start with a baseline scan of both your neural patterns during direct interaction. Then we'll begin the transfer process. Sarah glanced at her watch. The APD tactical team would be in position by now, waiting for her signal. But the facility was a fortress, and Kane's security would see them coming. Unless... I want to see everything, she said, stepping closer to Kane. All the research, all the data. If we're doing this, I need to understand exactly what happens to Max. Kane smiled, pleased by her apparent surrender. Of course. The more you understand, the more effectively we can replicate your connection. He turned to the control panel, entering commands. Sarah moved casually, keeping her body between Kane and Max. Her hand brushed her jacket pocket, feeling the transmitter there. One press would alert the tactical team, but timing was everything. Max's ears twitched again. 2 minutes. The guard behind him shifted his weight, adjusting his grip on the chain. In the glass chambers visible through the doorway, the test subject dogs grew restless, sensing the rising tension. Your dedication to Max is admirable, Kane said, still focused on the controls. Most handlers would have tried something reckless by now, but you understand the bigger picture. Sarah thought of all the dogs in those chambers, of the handlers who'd proved resistant, of Max's blood on cold concrete, and Kane's clinical smile as he planned to tear apart something sacred. You're right, she said softly. I do understand. Max's ears twitched once more. 1 minute. It was time to show Kane exactly what their connection could do. Sarah's finger pressed the transmitter just as the facility's lights flickered. 1 second of darkness. That's all they needed. In that instant, Max exploded into action, years of training and trust culminating in a perfectly synchronized dance of handler and dog. The chain leash went taut as Max lunged, not at his handler, but at Kane's control panel. The guard's grip broke, sending him stumbling into the second guard. Sarah was already moving, her body responding to Max's momentum like they'd practiced this 1,000 times. In a way they had. Every operation, every training session had been preparation for this moment. Stop them! Kane's composed facade shattered as he scrambled for an alarm panel. But Max was faster, his powerful jaws closing on the scientist's sleeve, dragging him away from the controls. Sarah dropped the first guard with a precision strike, while Max's momentum sent the second one crashing into the examination table. Security breach in Sector 7. Kane's voice rose over the facility's intercom. Subject 0 is loose. Contain and sedate. Sarah grabbed Kane's tablet, fingers flying over the screen. The other dogs, she said, meeting Max's eyes. He understood immediately, releasing Kane and sprinting toward the glass chambers. The tablet's security codes, captured by her hidden camera and decoded by APD tech experts, flashed green. Chamber doors hissed open throughout the facility. You fools! Kane staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his torn sleeve. Those dogs are unstable. You'll get everyone killed. But Sarah had seen something in those chambers that Kane, for all his scientific brilliance, had missed. The dogs weren't unstable. They were waiting. Like Max, they'd been gathering intelligence, learning patterns, staying alert for an opportunity. Now, as alarms blared and security teams rushed through the corridors, a dozen highly trained K9s joined the fight. APD tactical teams are 3 minutes out, Sarah announced, zip-tying Kane's hands. Your research has been transmitted to our servers for the past hour. It's over. It's never over. Kane's laugh held an edge of madness. You think your police department is the only organization interested in what we've achieved. There are others, with deeper pockets and fewer scruples. They'll find you both eventually. Max's growl cut through the chaos, a sound Sarah had never heard from him before. In the doorway stood Dr. Monica Chen, Kane's chief researcher, holding what looked like a modified tranquilizer rifle. I was wondering when you'd show up, Kane said calmly. Protocol Omega, if you please. Chen fired, but Max was already moving. He caught the dart meant for Sarah, his body twisting in mid-air. Sarah's heart stopped as he hit the ground, sliding across the polished floor. Max! The scream tore from her throat as she dove toward her partner. Behind her, Kane took advantage of the distraction, slipping his restraints and bolting for a hidden door panel. Chen reloaded, taking aim at Sarah's exposed back, but Kane had made a crucial mistake. He'd assumed Max was down, that the bond he'd studied so obsessively could be broken by mere chemistry. He didn't understand that some connections went deeper than science could measure. Max's eyes opened, meeting Sarah's gaze. The dart had only grazed him, leaving a shallow cut across his shoulder. In that split-second look, an entire conversation passed between them. Sarah rolled left as Max launched himself right, their movements perfectly mirrored. Chen's second shot hit empty air. The hidden door slid open, but Kane found his escape route blocked by 3 of his former test subjects, a German Shepherd and 2 Belgian Malinois, their experimental sensors now serving a different purpose. In the corridors beyond, the sound of combat mixed with police breach charges detonating at key structural points, exactly where Max's intelligence had indicated. It's funny, Sarah said, approaching Chen as Max kept her covered. You studied us for years, but you never really understood. It's not about neural patterns or sensory enhancement. It's about trust. Stand down, Officer Collins. Chen's finger tightened on the trigger. You have no idea what we're really working toward. The military applications alone are finished. Captain Rivera's voice boomed from the doorway as tactical teams flooded the room. Along with your funding, your permits, and your careers. Chen's rifle clattered to the floor as reality set in. Throughout the facility, the sound of resistance faded as APD teams secured each sector. The liberated dogs, far from being unstable, were actively assisting in the takedown, their training overriding the trauma of their captivity. Sarah knelt beside Max, examining his wound. Cutting it a little close there, partner. His tail wagged once, and she felt tears threatening. 6 years of partnership, and he could still surprise her with his courage. Sarah. Rivera's voice was gentle. We found the others. 3 more facilities, just like this one. Teams are moving in now. Whatever they were planning, it died here tonight. Max's ears pricked forward suddenly. Sarah felt it too. A change in the air pressure, a subtle shift in the facility's ambient noise. Years of experience translated into instant action. Everybody down! The explosion ripped through the lower levels, Kane's final failsafe attempting to bury his secrets forever. But even as the floor buckled and emergency lights flashed, Sarah felt no fear. Max was already moving, guiding their team towards safety, his powerful body pressing against her legs when debris fell too close. They emerged into the cold night air as secondary explosions lit up the shipping yard. Sarah watched the facility collapse in on itself, taking with it years of twisted science and broken ethics. Beside her, Max stood tall despite his injury, his presence as steady as the day they'd first met. Kane and Chen were led past in handcuffs, their perfect suits now covered in dust. You don't understand what you've destroyed, Kane called out. The potential we could have unlocked. Sarah scratched behind Max's ears, feeling the familiar texture of his fur, the warmth of his body pressing against her leg. Actually, she said. "I understand perfectly. Some bonds aren't meant to be replicated. They can only be earned, one day at a time, one trust at a time." Max's tail wagged, and together they watched the sunrise paint the sky over Atlanta, knowing that somewhere in the city a new case was waiting. A new chance to prove that the strongest connections aren't forged in laboratories, but in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in the silent understanding between partners who would die for each other without hesitation. And that was something no science could ever duplicate. 3 months after the raid on Kane's facility, Sarah stood in front of the courthouse, adjusting Max's dress uniform collar. His wounds had healed, leaving only a thin scar across his shoulder, a small price for shutting down one of the largest illegal research operations in Atlanta's history. "Ready for this, partner?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Max's tail wagged once, his posture perfectly professional, despite the crowd of reporters gathering on the courthouse steps. Today wasn't just Kane's sentencing. It was a landmark case for canine rights and protections nationwide. Inside, the courtroom hummed with tension. Kane and Chen sat with their lawyers, their once immaculate appearances now dulled by months in custody. Behind them, rows of spectators included representatives from police canine units across the country, animal rights organizations, and military oversight committees. But Sarah's attention was drawn to the special section near the front, handlers and dogs rescued from Kane's other facilities. The investigation had uncovered a network spanning 3 states, with dozens of dogs stolen or purchased under false pretenses. Each handler had a story similar to hers, a unique bond that Kane had tried to quantify, replicate, and ultimately destroy. "All rise," the bailiff called, as Judge Maria Rodriguez entered. Max stood at perfect attention beside Sarah, his discipline bearing a stark contrast to Kane's nervous fidgeting. "Before we proceed with sentencing," Rodriguez began, "the court would like to acknowledge the unique nature of this case. Dr. Kane, you stand convicted of multiple felonies: animal cruelty, illegal human experimentation, theft of police assets, and conspiracy against law enforcement. But these charges barely scratch the surface of your crimes." The judge paused, looking directly at Max. "This court has reviewed extensive evidence, including Dr. Kane's own research, demonstrating that police canines possess cognitive and emotional capabilities far beyond what our legal system currently recognizes. Your attempts to weaponize these capabilities have inadvertently established precedent for expanding canine protections under the law." Sarah felt Max lean slightly against her leg, his way of showing support when he sensed her emotions rising. The judge continued, her voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. "Dr. Monica Chen, as chief researcher, you claim your actions were motivated by scientific curiosity. However, the evidence shows you knowingly continued these experiments despite clear signs of animal suffering. Your own notes document the psychological trauma inflicted on both dogs and handlers." Chen stared at the floor, unable to meet the eyes of the handlers she had helped torture. Behind her, Kane remained oddly calm, as if still analyzing some experiment only he could see. "The court sentences Dr. Marcus Kane to 25 years in federal prison," Rodriguez declared. "Dr. Chen, in light of your cooperation, you are sentenced to 15 years. Additionally, both defendants are permanently barred from any research involving animals or law enforcement." But the judge wasn't finished. More importantly, this case has led to the creation of the Canine Officer Protection Act, which will ensure that crimes against police dogs are treated with the same severity as crimes against human officers. Their service and sacrifice deserve no less. As if understanding the significance of the moment, Max stood taller. Around the courtroom, other canine officers did the same, a silent demonstration of the very bond Kane had failed to understand. Outside, after the media frenzy died down, Sarah walked with Max through Piedmont Park. The late afternoon sun painted the Atlanta skyline in gold, and families enjoying the warm spring day stopped to wave at the famous K9 team. Max's popularity had only grown since the case made national news, but fame hadn't changed him. He remained focused, professional, and utterly devoted to his work. They reached their favorite spot by the lake, where Sarah often came to think between cases. "You know what Kane never figured out?" she said softly, watching Max track a flock of geese overhead. "He thought he could isolate what makes you special, break it down into data and chemicals, but he was looking in the wrong place." Max turned to her, head tilted in that expression she'd come to read as clearly as words. Sarah smiled, scratching his favorite spot behind his ears. "The real magic isn't in neural patterns or sensory enhancement. It's in moments like this. Every morning briefing, every late-night stakeout, every time you somehow know exactly what I'm thinking before I say it. That's not something you can manufacture in a lab." Their radio crackled, a possible break-in at a downtown warehouse. Max was on his feet instantly, already focused on their next mission. Sarah stood, brushing grass from her uniform. "What do you say, partner? Ready to show them what a real connection looks like?" Max's answer came in the form of a soft bark and that familiar look of absolute trust. Together, they headed for their patrol car, leaving behind the ghosts of Kane's laboratory and the cold equations that had tried to define their bond. In the end, that's what Kane had never understood. You couldn't measure loyalty in wavelengths or quantify trust in data points. The strongest connections weren't built in laboratories, but in the countless small moments between partners who chose each other, day after day. Sarah opened the car door, and Max jumped into his customized seat. As they pulled away from the park, she glanced in the rearview mirror, catching his alert expression as he scanned the streets ahead. The scar on his shoulder had faded, but their bond had only grown stronger. Let others try to explain it with science. She and Max knew the truth. Some partnerships transcended explanation. They simply were, as natural as breathing, as unshakable as faith. And in Atlanta's gathering dusk, a K9 unit responded to another call, their silent understanding worth more than all the research in the world. Just another day on the job for two partners who had faced the worst humanity could offer and emerged stronger. Their connection a testament to something no laboratory could ever replicate. The simple, unbreakable bond between a handler and her dog, built on trust, tested by fire, and proven in the line of duty, one case at a time.